Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Eric Schmidt. I'm the Assistant Director here at the BU African Studies Center. If you haven't joined us before, we usually begin our Walter Rodney seminar series with remarks by our guest, and then we'll have a Q&A following. You can submit your questions using the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen, or during the discussion, you can click to raise your hand and we can call on you so you can speak your question. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Abdoulaye Sounaye here. He is an anthropologist and a scholar of religion who heads the Leibniz Zentrum Modern Orient's research unit entitled Contested Religion Between Religiosity, Morality, and Intellectual Culture. He also serves as an associate professor at Université Abdoulaye in Niamey, Niger. Abdoulaye obtained his PhD in religious studies and anthropology at Northwestern University and the MA in Religious Studies at Arizona State University, funded by a Fulbright Award. His research has been supported by the Volkswagen Foundation, Codestria, the Social Science Research Council, and other organizations. He publishes widely on Islam, modernity, secularism, and media in West Africa, including his monographs Islam et Modernité with La Harmattan, and Muslim Critics of Secularism, Ulama, and Democratization in Niger. He also had published several book chapters and articles, including in the Journal of Religion in Africa, Islamic Africa, the Journal of African Cultural Studies, and Cahiers d'études africaines, among others. And before his graduate years, he also served as interim director of BU's Study Abroad program in Niger. It's through his close friendship with our departed friend Stu Rosenfeld that I got to meet Abdoulaye many years ago. And many of our students have actually known him over those years as sort of their host, either as the director or as their sort of host dad while they're living with the host family. So Abdoulaye, it's a great pleasure to welcome you back to BU.
Thank you, Eric. It's really a great honor to have this opportunity to lead this or to be involved in this activity with BU. I remember my first time on campus at BU. One of the most impressive things I saw at BU, and that was my first time in the US actually, is the library. I was so amazed by the resources BU has. And I remember sitting in my office at the African Studies Center and then just given the list of books I needed. And then they would be put on my desk. So really, thank you again. And it's a great honor to be back at BU and then present some of my research. So this is not really a paper, I would say. It's a presentation about a research I have started with a team. I have 3 PhD students on this project. The project, the acronym is Boko, Religion, Morality, and Boko in West Africa, Student Training for a Good Life. So of course you can hear life is part of what I'm trying to study with my colleagues, PhD students, but also postdocs here at Berlin. So most of the research actually on the Boko project has been on Niger and Nigeria. So 2 universities we've picked, Université Abdoulaye of Niamey, Niger, and the University of Ibadan. We have now a colleague joining who would be also working on 2 universities, one in Benin and the other one in Togo. So just to say, university life is part of what we are trying to study or to say something about, especially when it happens on campus. And of course, we want also to say something about the university. What is the state of the university today in West Africa? What is actually a university? This research is an attempt to understand the university in the terms the student, for example, and more generally, the practitioners of university are talking about it here. And for today, I'm going to focus on the Université Abdou-Moumouni of Niamey, because I wanted to have a more coherent presentation. I could have maybe added some of the findings we have already on the University of Ibadan University or Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria. But for now, I think to make the conversation easier and perhaps my presentation also more understandable, I would keep it to Abdou-Moumouni University. So, what is actually a university? How is it affected by the aspirations of its practitioners? And some of the aspirations I am going to talk about have to do with religion and religiosity, and in particular, again, here, Islam. How is the university appropriated, and how are we to theorize its trajectories? How do we inscribe these attempts at analysis in the intellectual history of this institution, or to put it in a more empirical terms, what kind of anthropology of the university can we produce today? The university as an institution of learning, but also as an institution where socialization becomes one of the major concerns for those who live on campus, but also for families who send their children to those institutions. One thing I would like to say right from the beginning, and the way we have conceptualized this research, and the way I would like to talk about the Abdou-Moumouni University today, is institutions are products of particular politics and historical trajectories. And today, I think I could say I have the opportunity to talk about an institution where I have been trained. I'm actually a product of Université Abdou-Moumouni, but now I am coming back to analyze that institution through this research on religion, morality, and Boko. What are those questions I would like to ask today about Abdou-Moumouni University? I would like to do it through what I call projecting life, Boko learning and religiosity at Université Abdou-Moumouni. Perhaps I can start by saying the Abdou-Moumouni University is one of the youngest universities maybe in the region, well, the post-independence universities in the region. It was created in 1971, so compared to many other universities, for example, University of Dakar, University of Ibadan, Abdou-Moumouni University is a very young one. Still, it's carried, or part of the project of the university was to carry this aspiration to build a state, to build a nation, to produce an elite. Recently, I think that there is a shift in the conception, or actually the perception of the university. I believe many would say it went from an institution of production of elite to an institution which is now struggling with massification, trying to keep up with the quality of learning and the employment, or at least providing skills, employability for its graduates. It has been a training ground of the cadre, les cadres nationaux, as the French would have it in that context. But perhaps one should also say that Abdou-Moumouni University has been historically a hotbed of protest. You know, I think it's similar to many universities in the regions, demonstrations, activism, based essentially, or fueled essentially by political positions or ideologies, Pan-Africanism, Marxism, which were for a long time the kind of ideological references of the student being trained on those campuses. One historical maybe juncture when it comes to reference, when it comes to University Abdou-Moumouni, I would say it's the role the Université Abdou-Moumouni played into the national conference in 1991. The national conference happened in 1991, but the whole movement that led to the national conference in Niger, and then therefore to the democratization process, started with the killing of 3 students on February 9th, 1990. That was kind of the triggering element of the whole democratization process. From that time, the student movement in many ways have been considered as part of les forces vives de la nation, basically those who speak for the nation, those who are the guardians of the democratic order. But perhaps today one could easily say there is a new generation of students who do not really build up their political positions, their investment in activism on Marxism, Leninism, for example, or on Pan-Africanism. What they resort to today is religion and religiosity. And that is one of the things I would like us to consider here. So one of, or at least part of my argument in this presentation is to say that the university is still a fabric of elites, but the kind of elite it's producing today is an elite which is very much invested in religiosity, which gives significance, which gives importance to religion, being religious, and in particular being Muslim and being Christian. This is something which really is new, I would say, on Abdou-Moumouni University campus, and perhaps something which is also affecting, as perhaps we can talk about it, the whole curriculum and the image of the university today. Now, when it comes to life, what is actually that whole preoccupation with life? I would like to share maybe my, okay, sorry, 1 minute. Sorry. Oops. So life is a preoccupation on campus, and how is it a preoccupation? I try to pay attention to the concept, to the recurrence of terms that refer to life in my interactions with students, with my colleague, faculty members, but also with the staff members. Here, I would just focus on the students. What do they see, or how do they speak about life? First of all, is really, perhaps you can see it on this, on that image I have here on my slide. The reference to la vie, which is something very symbolic in that context. Many would talk about la bonne vie, la belle vie in that context, but here I would like us to consider just life. And many would also use the concept, the Hausa concept, which tries to capture life, existence, being in the world, or what we have construed as such, which is rayuwa. So rayuwa is a very powerful concept, or life concept, I would say, in Hausa. And it has been used to characterize, for example, urban life, or rayuwa birni, for example, is one of the expressions one could hear when people try to compare life in the city to life in the village. But I think the preoccupation about life in this context, or life as a preoccupation, has to do also with the indeterminacy of life and the condition within which people try to make something out of their lives. try to exist, try to achieve something, or try to take charge and not leaving it to chance. For example, there is a lot of references in my conversations with students, this kind of use of la chance, sa'a in Hausa, or sai in Zarma. So just maybe to put it right from the beginning, I used actually three languages in this research: French, Hausa, and Zarma. So of course, it's a matter of translation. Sometimes actually Rayuwa doesn't translate exactly in terms of life or existence, but I would like to forget about those discrepancies and then focus just on the kind of more or less I would say proximity of meanings and references that we see in these concepts. So take charge and not leaving it to chance, making life a project that needs to be planned and executed. But this time, again, with reference to religion and religiosity. One of the most significant trend actually on Abdul Mumuni University today is Salafism. So it's a religious trend, it's an Islamic trend, which has promoted reform and cultivation of religiosity along the lines of the model of Prophet Muhammad. So I would like also to say in this context, or at this point, that the university, I see it also, it's still kind of space of competing sources of norms. Of course, I mentioned Marxist-Leninism a few minutes ago. I would not say that Marxism-Leninism has disappeared, or Pan-Africanism is not one of the ideology. They are still very powerful discourses or sources of norms, but what I'm seeing, it's the dominance of Salafism in particular in this context. So once, sorry, I need to move, yeah. But I'm also referring to Boko as I try to say something about the university. What is actually Boko? Boko is a Hausa concept, as many of you might know. And it's a concept that has become popular, of course, through Boko Haram, and how Boko Haram has popularized that concept is something maybe that needs to be discussed. And how actually Boko become haram is something that also needs to be discussed. But in this context, I'm not going to really talk about the haram nature or the halal nature of Boko. I would just take it as a concept that tries to say something about an intellectual culture, a tradition of learning, a tradition of training, but also a specific social model. So in Hausa context, actually, Boko has been used to refer to fake, something which is not real, something which is not, which escape actuality in a way. But also, it has been used to refer to the secular institution of learning. For example, école in Niger, or public schooling, secular schooling in the Nigerian context. I would like us to keep in mind here the fluidity of the concept itself. As we go from, for example, ilimin Boko, which is referred to a specific type of knowledge, secular knowledge, maybe one could translate here, to the ilimin adini. Ilimin adini meaning here the religious knowledge, and in particular knowledge, Islamic learning. So what comes with Boko, it's really what emerges with Boko, I would say, is a structure and organized learning culture, formal training. For example, in Hausa, people refer to Makaranta Boko as being a systematic way of engaging knowledge production or knowledge transmission, the production of graduates, for example, at the university. So in many ways, I would say that Boko becomes associated with the West can be easily understandable. Because historically, the problematic of Boko actually emerged with the encounter with Western type of education. One could actually see how today all those jihadi movements who are against Western-like educational system, how they attack schools in Burkina, in Mali, in Niger, or in Nigeria or Cameroon. So I would like to say here, Boko refers also or points to a colonial condition. It's about Europe, of course. And when it comes to that institution of learning, which is école or school or schooling, it definitely carries this baggage of being an institution of a colonial rule, which has been imposed onto population in many ways, forcefully, and to which many populations also have reacted with anxiety, and even today with violence. As a concept, I would like us to consider Boko as a part of a local conceptual history, and also as an anthropological concept in the sense that it refers to how, for example, many Hausa communities or Hausa thought, if we can put it that way, has reacted to a European-like tradition. The encounter with Europe, I think, is very much something which is important in the conceptualization of Boko. Boko, when it refers to political, but also to cultural projects that have really shaped the colonial rule. Now, what I'm saying in this context, as we take Boko and religiosity, we associate them and try to say something about the university. Of course, the university becomes the epitome of Boko. It's the most elaborate construction of knowledge, of secular knowledge. It's the institution that celebrates Boko. It's the institution that creates the conditions of reproduction of Boko. So in many ways, it's the embodiment of a Western-like epistemology, way of seeing the world. And perhaps even it creates a life world which is shaped by non-religiosity. And many have actually even said anti-religiosity. So Boko is a fabric of the university, is a fabric of elites. And what is happening today, I would say at Abdoulaye University, is that fabric is losing part of its secularity in many ways. And it's becoming religious. It produces elites that today are leading Muslim organizations or Christian organizations, and no longer only political organizations or civil society organizations, la société civile, as people would call it in Niger. So today, I think les enfants de la République, as the students have been called in many instances, are also becoming les enfants de Dieu. I actually wrote a piece on that, and which start with les étudiants aussi sont des enfants de Dieu, which is actually a statement made by one of my interlocutors during my interviews on campus. So I would like to refer to that kind of celebration of the les enfants de la République, who are becoming, who are a privileged category, who are really a distinctive social category in the local context, but who are embracing religion and religiosity, taking it onto the university campus, and then trying to shape I would say, the whole dynamics, the cultural dynamics, the intellectual dynamics on campus. Now, one of the sides, I would say, of the manifestations of that investment in religiosity is la formation. La formation here can be translated as in terms of training. Just giving somebody a training, for example, on many posters or flyers, you see this reference to la formation islamique, as you can see it on this flyer, for example, cours de formation islamique. Here you see formation islamique, it's even in plural. And then look at what is said at the bottom, the kind of blue rectangle I have there. Plus je suis utile. So there is this sort of celebration of knowledge, of learning, which is interpreted as the condition of being useful to the community, but also to oneself, because I think it's also important to point to that kind of celebration of religiosity, what I call la religion à la première personne, which is the self, the subject, carrying this or cultivating a particular religiosity, which is actually centered on the subject, the individual subject. Of course, the individual subject is very much in relation to many other individuals or even institutions, but I think there is really emphasis on the self, on the individual, which is illustrated by this quote. So one of the powerful concepts or references in the La Formation Islamique is knowing Islam. What is actually knowing Islam? Knowing Islam in the sense of, okay, you know the Quran, but also you know the history of Islam, which takes, I would say, many groups of students into all kinds of activities that are that revolve around going beyond the Quran, going beyond the scriptures, I would say, the history of Islam, the intellectual history of Islam, philosophy of Islam, mathematics in Islam, or how Islam has or Muslims have contributed to the history of mathematics or sciences, Ibn Sina, Averroes, Al-Farabi, Al-Jabbar, all those are references that one sees very much in the debates that are happening on campus, on Abdoulaye University. And that is, in many ways, I would say, an agenda of Islamization of knowledge. So the concept of Islamization of knowledge is a very powerful one in Nigeria. It's picking steam, I would say, in Niger, but perhaps not in the same ways. It has become one of the key drivers of investment of Islam on university campuses. But there are linkages, of course. Students at Abdoulaye University are very much connected to students across the region, and in particular those universities in Nigeria through many channels. So there are associations, there are organizations, but also through many of the preachers who are basically the figures that communicate or nurture that culture of religiosity on campus. So it's also about becoming a role model. La Formation Islamique is about becoming a role model, as the quote said, the more you know, the more you are useful to yourself, but useful also to your society. And I think what is happening also with La Formation Islamique is the creation or the institution of a religious space. And that religious space is invested by infrastructures of social curriculum. What I mean by social curriculum is the kind of sets of activities, events that contrast with the academic curriculum. I think we can look at it in relation to the academic curriculum, which is structured, which has disciplines, which has subjects, and the social curriculum would be designed to serve or to cultivate a particular religiosity and in a particular way. For example, you have elements of the social curriculum that would tell you, okay, you can read and master the Quran in 30 days. So you just need 30 lessons to master or to read, to know how to read the Quran. This is actually a very powerful reference in the whole cultivation or culture of learning, as we can see in the next slide. So what I think is also happening from what I understand in this research is really religion is becoming a subject, a discipline, and through those events, those activities that are happening with the social curriculum. Now, the social curriculum is based on cultures and practices of learning. I would like to show here this board, which was standing in one of the mosques on Abdoulaye University campus. You can see, for example, how the day, the week, and even the month is scheduled, and how reference to cultivation of learning is all across the board. You can see, for example, les jours, les activités, les moments, so the temporality of that cultivation, what you do, what kind of activity you do, is something very important in this context. Then the second set of cultures and practices of learning. Mosques are sites of intellectual practice of learning for Arabic literacy groups, Quran reading circles, Dawah committees. Dawah here refers to the call to Islam. And that the call to Islam basically means people gather, they study. They could also watch films, documentaries, comment on them. They could have guest speakers, which actually I would say in many ways have led to the emergence of religious figures and personnel on campus. They are certainly, today at Abdoulaye University, students, I would say, who are more involved in religious activities than in academic activities, balancing or overbalancing, even I would say, the social curriculum in relation to the academic curriculum. And then here, reading the Quran becoming one of the major activities of the social curriculum and the cultures and practices of learning. I would just play, it's a 1 minute something video just to give you a sense of what is happening here. And maybe, let's see. I'm clicking on good. So what I would say, some of the comments I would make on this is perhaps one could pay attention. One can see the setting. This is in one of the main mosques at Abdul Mumuni University, the Mosque Al Mustafa. For example, the concentration, how students are concentrated on what they are doing. Many of them are reading the Quran. And what is actually happening here is they are waiting for the prayer to begin, the Friday prayer. Usually there are at least 2,000 of people who gather for the Friday prayer inside the mosque, but also outside of the mosque. Of course, here most of the people we see in this setting are students, I would say, but outside of the mosque, you have also people who are living in the vicinity who attend the prayer. And of course, I think one important element to add to this is the celebration of learning, and especially the reading of the Quran, which goes into what I have called a few minutes ago the social curriculum. And perhaps why is that important to note here? Many actually would say that Quran has acquired such a significance that one could easily get it on campus much easier than any other notebook or book for their classroom or their lecture. So in a way, the valuation of religiosity happens also through those textbooks. So I'm mentioning through books and pamphlets. I'm mentioning here the Quran because it's one of the most representative scriptures that students read, especially those who are involved in these activities. But there are also many other books and pamphlets that are devoted to cultivating learning, to promote religiosity, something which is also very much similar to what many Christian groups do. Of course, I haven't mentioned the Christian side here. I don't need to, because I'm just focusing on the Islam or the Muslim activities here. But I have to say, at least in the contextualization of these practices, one has also to keep in mind what is happening on the Christian side. This kind of offensive to conquer the souls, I would say, of students, and also to get part of the influence or have influence on an elite in the making. Perhaps my last slide, or the last slide I would like to you is what is actually that connection of university and religiosity? What do I want to say, or what do I understand in this? What do I see in this connection between the university and religiosity? Of course, is an instance of production or even reproduction of norms. But perhaps more specifically, one could think about how values are being produced. What are the values? What is valuable today on Abdul Mumuni University? Perhaps one could easily say moral values, religious practice, the autonomy of thinking, departing, for example, from the whole influence of laicity, secularism, and then promoting a cultivation of life which is based on religiosity. And on the other side, next to the production of values, I think there is a process of production of models, in particular political model, social models, intellectual models. The intellectual today, as he or she is defined at Abu Mumuni University campus, is a social model who is very much interested in cultivating her religiosity. Becoming religious is something significant. And it has become significant in part because it's valuable. So the kind of moral economy which is driving the campus, and beyond the campus, the society makes religious figures very inspirational. And students are, both students and professors, lecturers are also embracing those models. Actually, I have to say many of the lecturers in this context have embraced similar attitudes, have embraced religiosity, the cultivation of religiosity, and have become in their own rights, I would say, inspirational figures. I can name a number of them here, but no need to mention any specific colleague, but and they have become very influential figures, not only in their classrooms or in their lecture halls, but also in the mosque, and when they participate in debates on Islamic issues. I would like to keep it here. Probably some questions that I have raised, to which maybe I haven't given any answer, or I have tried to answer, but perhaps the audience or the participant in this meeting would like to also elaborate some of the things I said, ask questions, react, and suggest maybe orientations when it comes to really analyzing this complex of university and religiosity. Eric, I would like to give it back to you. And thank you again for your attention.
Thanks so much, Abdoulaye. If you don't mind, if you want to go ahead and end your slideshow, then we can can see you. So again, if you've joined us a little bit late, you're welcome to submit questions via the Q&A box on the bottom, or you can click the raise hand button and we can call on you, and I can unmute you so you can speak a question. We did have a couple questions come in already during your presentation, Abdoulaye, so I'll start. First one here is from Jim McCann, one of our faculty here in history, also a Northwestern grad. Thank you. In what ways does the audience you show here deal with what we would call diversity, to include Salafism versus Sufism versus Christian groups in Niger? And he's thinking here of Barbara Cooper's study of the SIM groups that exist in Niamey. And a second comment too, no women in the video, are they elsewhere in this gathering? And he mentions that he's worked in areas heavily engaged in Salafism in rural Ethiopia and Sudan.
We go one by one, right?
Yeah, I think we can go one by one.
I'm not sure I understand the first part of the question.
Yeah, Jim, perhaps I can unmute you and then you can elaborate a little bit. If he's there.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm just interested in the ranges of diversity that one sees across West Africa to East Africa over time, and more recently, especially more recently, the ranges of approaches to Islam as a part of public life, as a part of academic life, go all the way from Salafism to people who are more traditionally practicing in cooperation or in conflict. To what extent do you see that on these campuses you're looking at? And thank you very much for the presentation. It's really interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, for Abdul University, I think one of the features of religiosity on campus is really the dominance of Salafism. There are many other religious groups. The Sufi, in particular, the Tijaniya has its own group, or actually a kind of conjunction between the Tijaniya and the Qadiriya. There are also many other Christian groups, but they are less visible, I would say, than the Salafi, who are definitely more structured, more strategic in their use of spaces and any opportunity they have to lead activities. For example, the main mosque, the mosque where I showed in the video, is actually governed or administered by the Salafi group, Association des étudiants musulmans à l'université. They said Musulman, but actually the trend that dominates is very much Salafism in that context. Yeah, I did not talk about women in this presentation, but I should have, definitely, because I think it's also one of the things, one of the most visible features, I would say, of religiosity on campus. For example, there are several mosques devoted to women, so which is something absolutely. I remember maybe 10 or a bit more than 10 years ago, there was no mosque for women, and women were not expected actually to pray on campus, or at least not in the open air or in the mosque. So they usually waited until they return back home to pray. But now they have really women's spaces, mosques that are designed that are reserved for them. And in those mosques, of course, they do all kinds of activities, also debates, preaching, Arabic literacy, Quranic learning, part of what I, again, call the social curriculum.
So we have a couple other questions that have come in the Q&A box, and then I'll also turn over to some of the people with their hands up. But I want to lump together two questions here. The first one is there anything other than Islam that the college students are learning? And this sort of the second linked question is asking for clarification. So it seems to be that you're saying that religiosity is perhaps distracting negatively from other forms of learning on campus. Is that an accurate interpretation of what you're presenting, or how might you clarify this relationship to other subjects taught on campus?
I'm not qualifying it in that sense. What I'm just saying is actually the secular curriculum is being challenged in many ways. And the secular space or the status of the university as a secular institution is being challenged because of the prominence or the visibility or the influence of what I call the social curriculum. The social curriculum, the way I see it, is essentially religious. And in this specific case, it comes from all these Islamic organizations, and in particular, the Association des étudiants musulmans. So what I'm saying is that really the university is transforming, and what is the students are operating or are living under conditions where, yeah, they have to take into consideration the presence of Islam, even if they are not, for example, Muslim. The fact that, for example, an Islamic organization is having an activity in the lecture hall has an impact on the community, on the academic community, be they student, support staff, or simply lecturers. So that the norms of the universities or the norms of the practice of academic life are changing. And they are changing because the Islamic group in particular, the Salafi group, is having an important impact on them. To the point that, for example, I'll just give you an example. Maybe 2-3 years ago, I was teaching a seminar. I think 3 years ago, I was teaching a seminar. One of the striking things I realized was, okay, when it's 4 p.m., 4 p.m. is the time when people get the prayer, the Asr prayer. Students in the past, they would ask permission to go out and pray. But now they don't. They just get out of the lecture hall. And of course, the lecturer has to stop. Well, I had to stop my lecture because if I lose 70% of the students taking my class, well, I don't feel comfortable continuing my class. So those are the kind of things that happen. And in a way, those practices are having an impact on the schedule itself, to the point that many of my colleagues now do not want to have class in the afternoon because they fear that the class or the prayer would take at least 20-25%. Or 25 minutes of their time. So it's not official, but the practice of the social curriculum that comes with this habitus of religiosity, I would say, is affecting the curriculum. The same goes with, for example, activities in the lecture halls. So religious activities. In principle, the university is a secular, and then only in mosques or the organizations are supposed to have their events or whatever they organize. But now they take they take possession of the classrooms. Of course, sometimes they also ask permission to use them. So religion is becoming authoritative, and the religion that is becoming authoritative, I would say, is Islam. And within Islam, the trend that is becoming authoritative is Salafism.
Great. So there's a lot of questions coming through. This is great. But let me take one more from the written Q&A, and then I'll call on some of the folks who've had their hands up. So this one's coming from Mitch Maidukia. You mentioned how the university has often been a center of protest in the past, and I think some of that was outward looking. How much of this religious shift in orientation on campus is outward looking, aiming to influence wider politics and society?
Yeah, of course. I think many of those, I would say because I know some of the leaders of these religious organizations, they are very much connected to the rest of the world. They are very much connected to, for example, to Nigeria, but also Muslim student associations in West Africa. They're very, very much connected. If you look at what they read, they have all kinds of texts, and one of them I would say is very much Maududi. This whole Islamism, this kind of promotion of Islamism through Maududi, but also Albani, the Hadith scholar of Albania, who has been one of the figures. But of course, they read Wahhabi literature also. So I think in many ways, you can say they are influenced. They have connections. I think to what extent those connections are influencing what they are doing locally is something that needs to be maybe studied a bit more in depth. But definitely I see those connections. I will give you, for example, just a figure, the leading figure of the promotion of Salafism on campus. Actually, he's a former student of Abdoulaye University. Perhaps those who know the campus Abdoulaye would remember Sheikh Dauda. He's a graduate of Abdoulaye University, and actually before he graduated, he went to Medina, the Islamic University of Medina, and he graduated from the University of Medina and then returned on campus at Abdoulaye University. Now he's the imam of the main mosque, and he is one of the patrons, I would say, of all those Salafi figures on campus.
Great, so let me transition to some of the folks who have their hands up. So Tim Weiskell, I see you've had your hand up for a while. Tim's one of our long-term visiting researchers here.
Well, I'm just curious about the resurgence around the world of this kind of what might be called religious expression and almost coercion on campus. There's a similar rise in American universities of groups that are called the God Squad, who like to occupy public space and claim adherence. I'm just wondering on two fronts. Is there a faculty opposition to this, whether it's openly voiced or somewhat sub rosa? And similarly, is there a student sense that this is intruding upon their educational experience?
Yes, they are, but not as not as powerful, I would say, or as influential as to change much in what those organizations are doing. I'll give you just one example. When a Christian group complain that well, they don't have a space to build a church, they would like to have one. So they take the request to the rector, and one of the issues that came up was, okay, yeah, this is a Muslim majority context, and it's not because we have all these mosques that Christians also would have a church on campus. So the question was actually led to a committee to decide, and one of the leaders of the committee is precisely one of those, the Salafi figure I mentioned. And of course, the issue died out, and I don't think they to this day they managed to resolve that issue. So that is one case. So maybe one could say interreligious, maybe interactions, competition, or rivalry happening there. But I know also that some of my colleagues, lecturers, have complained. But I don't think those voices have been powerful enough or influential enough to change much in the situation. Because faculty members also have been involved in the promotion of Islam, Salafism on campus. So I think that the issue is much more complicated than those who support or those who do not support. If one look at the whole context, I think governing religion and religiosity has become something very difficult to achieve on Abdou Moumouni University. And that is why actually I think the Salafi groups are having it their way, because I think they are more organized, they receive more support, and of course they come with a modernist discourse, which is very much appealing to many students, and of course to many faculty members too.
Great, so I think we have another question here from Bilkis.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Abdoulaye and Smith. Thank you so much. Some of what I'm about to say are questions, and some of them are comments. And I'd like to start with what have we done, or what have you done, or what have you seen done in anticipating or mitigating these problems? Because I am a Muslim and I practice Islam as moderacy, and we know that Islam preaches moderation. Everything should be in moderation. There's no space for extremism in Islam. What has been done to preach this and to, how do I put it, propel this in the minds of the Muslim youth? Because we know that many people are utilizing the minds of youth based on limited knowledge, because we know that many people are not investing their time in learning about their religion. They're basically going off of cultural and, as you said, the social curriculum to practice Islam. What have we done to ensure that the spirit of moderacy is being perpetrated amongst the youth, especially? Are we informing them, especially, say, for example, you mentioned prayer times and how it affects lecture time? Have we primed the students to understand that in Islam, there's the prayer time range? So it's not that the moment the prayer is called, you must say the prayer at that time. It is advocated that you say the prayer at the earliest times, but say, for example, you're learning something and you're in the presence of another person. Islam also teaches courtesy. And so part of courtesy is that you give your attention to someone that's teaching you something. And so it might be deemed disrespectful to walk out of a lecture class, especially when you're not asking for permission, or even if you did, there's a time frame. I assume that those lectures are not running for 5 hours. And so within your time frame, you could still take time before the lecture or right after the lecture or during a break in the lecture. But that also brings me to structuring. I attended undergraduate school in Nigeria, and I do know that we could have, I also was a medical student at the time, and we could have 4-hour lectures and there would be no breaks in between. And so I can understand sometimes the frustration of students, and they can say, this is a 4-hour class, there wouldn't be breaks in between. And even if there were breaks in between, it would be a bathroom dash break. It would be a 5-minute break, 2-minute break, reasonable amounts of time to quickly go to a corner, because you don't have to go to the mosque. You can go to a clean space, and there's usually many of those around where you can just say your prayer and then come right back to the class. So now it's a matter of educating the students, providing resources that will allow them to be flexible, and also structuring the program in such a way that students are aware that their rights are respected. Because I also feel like we've come to this space because all religions and all people have not in the past respected one another. The Muslims are not rising up saying that, and this is feeding into extremism, saying that, oh, well, I remember when we only had Christian schools, they wouldn't let our kids wear the hijab, they wouldn't let them go to a prayer, they would force them to learn the Bible, and they would forbid them from bearing their Islamic names or reading parts of the Quran. And so people were forced to say, oh, now we have to, create an Islamic school, and so we must do the same. However, we are making the mistake of doing the same thing that we were arguing against or antagonizing, saying, oh, so now if you're in a Muslim school, you cannot be a Christian, you cannot go to church, you cannot build a church in an Islamic environment. And that's not the way that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ lived. We know that he lived very well with his neighbors. He lived amongst Jews. He was a leader in Jewish communities. He was a leader in Christian communities. In fact, the first time that the Muslims did a jihad, they had moved to Abyssinia, which had a Christian king, and he had accepted them with open arms, and they didn't preach Islam, except that they had the directive of the chiefs and the kings there. So I think that as well, I'd like to say that we need to increase female involvement, because we know that the feminine temperament is very wonderful, and it also alleviates extremism, because women are not usually given to extremism, and women are reasonable, and the affairs of a woman allows for moderacy to be preached, because women are the ones who have to take a break from prayer even in the month of Ramadan, and have to take a break from fasting. And so this is a given for us to consider it and for us to be moderate. However, with men who have like a set timetable, a set routine, and there's not much given for flexibility, this is how extremism often flourishes. So what we must do is ensure that we're preaching moderacy and, infusing the tenets of Islam and teaching the less talked about factors that are so necessary in the world of today, to the youth of today, involving more women, structuring and ensuring that we're preaching, how do I put it, mutual respect in our communities. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. Yeah, I think one of the issues the governance of the university has to deal with when it comes to Abdoulaye University. I believe it's really religiosity, and how do you regulate religious practice, occupation of space, but at the same time, how do you create the conditions for well, one could say even maybe religious justice in a way, when decisions are made based on, well, affiliation to a particular religious group, and not just in reference to the principle of the university as an institution, as a public institution. I think there is a number of issues governance has to deal with, and perhaps now in the context of Abdoulaye University, I would say maybe I don't see that happening. Just to respond, but perhaps it's something which is also a process. As the dynamic goes, as the situation evolves, definitely I believe authorities have to consider the conditions that, or create the conditions for a manageable campus. There have been some intra-religious rivalries, competition, and even conflicts, but perhaps that has not become serious enough in a way to mobilize the university authorities to implement a policy. I'm not even sure that a policy is today something that the university has, because it seems to me that personal relationship, individual influences are more determining the conduct when it comes to issues than any principle defined by the university as a public space, as a universal place, as if I can put it that way. So definitely some intolerance, or I don't like the term radicalization or radicalism, but there is some truth claims that seems to be much stronger, and for that reason also impeding onto freedom, liberties of the rest of the community. So that is something problematic, and it's problematic. But for me, what I'm doing, what I'm trying to say, is to analyze those dynamics, and how are we to understand today the university as a learning institution. What are the kind of epistemologies that are dominating, that are shaping that institution? And clearly, religion has produced, is having such an influence that the secular epistemologies are being challenged, are being reshaped, and to some extent, actually, the way university works in that specific context has to take into consideration what students are coming with. What are the values? What is valuable for a student? What are they expecting to have on campus? And how are they affecting the institution? Not just as a set of building or personnel, but also as a vision. I think that's also what needs to be talked about, the aspirations of students who are part of this university community. And I'll give you also an example how religiosity can encroach onto the curriculum. There was a huge controversy about actually a course in sociology, and that course was about creationism in many ways, and students oppose that they refuse to be exposed to that I would say epistemology. So what is happening, what I want to say here is really the clash of, or the challenges that is happening, or the diversity of epistemologies. To some extent, until recently, really the secular epistemologies were dominating the interactions on campus. So the relationship between the lecturers and the students. To some extent, I would say. But today, I think there is some more ground gained by religious epistemologies, how people are defining knowledge, learning, value, norms, and definitely in that process, religion has gained significance. And how that is shaping the university is really what I'm trying to say. So we should talk about that history, that historical context of the university, and how it's being shaped, and what kind of product it's giving back to the society is one of the questions I am interested in.
Great. So we have another question here from Doug. Go ahead, Doug. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this really engrossing and fascinating presentation. So I say this as a fellow anthropologist of religion, that it was so great to see the detail, not just in the presentation, but I think especially some of the best some of the best things that I heard you speak about were in these in your responses to these questions. So the point about teaching at 4 o'clock and the difficulties that brought up, I thought was such a great example. And then kind of in some ways, my question builds on what you were just talking about, thinking about the diversity of epistemologies and this epistemological landscape that's changing the shape of these West African universities. In some ways, this question originally was kind of echoing things that Professor McCann and Dr. Weiskell were also talking about, thinking about interreligious diversity, and then also the relationships between these Salafis and other religious groups, whether they're Christian or Muslim on campus. So since you've already touched on some of those elements of it, I wanted to maybe expand the question a little bit to think not just about the relationship between different religious groups, but what's the relationship between these Muslim actors and other people who are coming at political issues from a very different ideological or epistemological starting point. So earlier in the presentation, you talked specifically about Marxism and Pan-Africanism and saying that they're still relevant, they're still on campus, even if they're not quite as dominant as this newer Salafism. But I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about whether you noted any interactions or any other kinds of communication or engagement between Muslims and those who are promoting a more Marxian or a Pan-Africanist vision for either political engagement or what people should be doing at the university.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for your question, Doug. Yeah, this is actually an important. It gives me the opportunity to talk about an important aspect of the interactions on campus, and I'll respond to that question by just referring to what is happening with the student council elections and how religion has become relevant to those campaigns. For example, student running for whatever positions in the student government. What you see now is really how influential religion or the religiosity is becoming. And of course, in the campaigns, many would build on their connections or their relation, or the support they get from religious organizations, in particular the main religious organization on campus, which is the Association des étudiants musulmans, which again is very much influenced by Salafi ideas. I don't see much of interest on the among the religious organization much interest in ideas of Pan-Africanism or Marxism or other ideologies from the religious organizations, but definitely the Student Council has become one of the stages where you see actually religion emerging as an important factor. Religion has become really relevant to whatever student council election that is happening at Abdoulaye University. But there is also something I think which is it's not just about the student council. I think that the image of the lecture, the religious lecture, or the good Muslim image of the lecturer has become also something very important. You know, I have myself, I've been exposed to that because something I couldn't imagine, for example, studying at Abdoulaye University, addressing my instructor and then asking him or her whether she prays or not. Man, I was faced to that situation. One of my students coming to me and then asking me, where do I pray and when do I pray? Trying to basically, situate me within this. But I know also all the politics or the religious politics behind that question, especially because of some of the questions I've been asking or some of the orientations I was given to my lectures, to my courses. Being critical thinker in many ways is challenging to some of those organizations, and especially when you claim certain philosophy. You know, when you are in the Department of Philosophy, they call the student in philosophy those who challenge God. And of course, God being the reference, God being the inspirational value in that context. You are challenged, and people try, and students in particular, I would say, try to figure out what kind of lecturer you are and what are actually your set of values and how are you relating to them. So maybe that's a bit too personal, but I experienced that situation.
So if I can ask then sort of a related question from our Q&A box here from Hannah, thank you so much for the interesting talk. I'd be curious to hear more about how this rise of religion within the university setting affects the wider religious landscape and who may lose authority or their audience as a consequence of this shift.
Well, of course, so what I said is the university is today producing a Muslim elite. That's really some social phenomenon which is happening. Traditionally, the Muslim elite is really produced outside of the confine of the University of the Mumuni. So those are trained, for example, in Saudi Arabia, they are trained in Senegal, they are trained in Nigeria, but today, or at least I would say the last 10 or 15 years, you see religious leaders or people who claim religious leadership coming out of the Abdoulaye University. Again, one of the most prominent Muslim figure in Niamey today was trained at Abdoulaye University. And many of those former president of the Association des étudiants musulmans, they have today their own organization. They become the personnel or the actors or what they call the Islamic civil society. Because, there is an Islamic civil society. That civil society which tries to build up on Islam and create a space for that voices or create the conditions for all kind of politics based on the promotion of Islam.
Great. So we have another question here from Baharu. Oh, sorry, I accidentally lowered your hand. Go ahead. You should be able to unmute. Oh, there we go. Hello? Yes, go ahead, Baharu.
Thank you for the conference. Yes. You are receiving me?
Yes.
Hello. Yes, I say thank you for the conference. And now, because I am a student in Abdoulaye University, and we now can appreciate clearly the dynamics of religious facts on the university space. And the question I want to know is, according to you and according to these dynamics on the campus university, can we say that we are going? I'm sorry, my English is not very good, but I want to know, ou bien si vous me permettez, monsieur le conférencier, je voudrais savoir à travers la dynamique actuelle des faits religieux sur les campus universitaires, comme vous l'avez dit aujourd'hui, c'est intégré, y compris par les étudiants, mais aussi les encadrants. Aujourd'hui, vous n'êtes pas sans savoir qu'un enseignant ne peut même pas aujourd'hui programmer son cours de 14h sinon de midi à 18h sans programmer l'heure de la pause prière. Et aujourd'hui, à travers cette dynamique-là, est-ce qu'on peut dire qu'on est en train de tendre vers, surtout dans un pays musulman, où 99% de la population se réclame de l'islam et qu'on voit qu'à l'université Abdou Moumouni, la plus grande institution du pays, il n'y a pas un département qui permet d'étudier la religion. Est-ce que selon vous, on peut, à travers cette dynamique des faits religieux, l'acceptation du moins, même si elle n'est pas normative, est-ce qu'on peut dire qu'on tend vers la création ou bien cette dynamique peut aller jusqu'à engendrer la création d'un département ou d'une faculté qui serait dédiée seulement à l'étude des religions? Voilà, en fait, c'est ce que je voudrais savoir selon ces dynamiques-là. Excusez-moi, I am sorry for those who cannot understand French language because I asked my question in French language because I am very fluent in it, not more in English. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Baharu. Yeah, you did a great job. I know. Yes, just to go back to the question Hannah was asking, I think what is happening on campus is not really foreign to what is happening to the society as a whole. I think the university is not really an isolated space, and often it's influenced by what is happening in the wider society. So, and in fact, what is happening in Niger is really at the social level or beyond the campus, in the political arena, in the economic sphere, or in cultural domain. It's really this kind of emergence of this influence of religion and religiosity, which is shaping or reshaping life and creating conditions that are far from being, I would say, secular, or at least creating additional conditions for life. So the value, what are the values? If we can talk about what are the values, what are the most important values today in the Nigerian context, many would say being religious and being Muslim, and then being good Muslim is really one of the values people can easily talk about. So the whole moral economy and the part of religion and religiosity in the moral economy is something very important. Just an anthropological element. It doesn't have to do with really believing or not, if I can put it that way. It's just the practice, social practice. In social practice, reference to religion and religiosity has become so important that, think about, for example, the words of address you see among students. Cher frère et sœur. It used to be cher camarade. For example, when I was studying at a women university, the word of address was cher camarade. Today it's cher frère et sœur, which is basically reference to religiosity. It might not be really, well, religion of the heart, if I can put it that way, but it could be just religion of practice. What social practice, how social practice takes or is shaped by reference to religion and religiosity. So in many ways, again, what is happening on campus is very much related to what is happening in the broader society, because I think the moral economy or the dynamics of the moral economy in the society is very much shaping what is happening on campus. And most of those students who are today leaders of the Islamic organization, let's not forget that many of them actually started when they were in high school, or even in college, as one could say. Les clubs musulmans, les clubs des jeunes musulmans, for example. So in a way, what I'm asking us to do or to pay attention to is not only the intellectual trajectory of the university as an institution of learning and production of elites, but also as a fabric of production of norms, values, and social models. If we think about what are the values of the social models today in the context of Niger, I think many of those values, many of those elites would be very much calling on religion and religiosity. Okay, at the highest level. So, and that is, I think, something which is happening, and which, as or at least as a scholar with an anthropological sensibility, I want to study more and I want to make sense of. So again, the question is about the University Baharu, and of course, it's also about very much what kind of subjectivities are emerging on that campus and then affecting the whole dynamics of learning and teaching in that specific context.
Well, thank you so much. We're just about out of time, so I think we need to wrap up here, even though we have a number of excellent questions in the queue. Abdoulaye, thank you so much for joining us. I'm glad you could join us. I'm glad we could have people from all over the world here with us today. Today is our last in our year-long series for the Walter Rodney Lecture series this year. So thanks so much for everyone who could join us. Next academic year, we're planning to, we'll sort of be moving back to a hybrid format where we'll be returning to our seminar rooms, but we're hoping to continue making them accessible for those of you who are not in Boston. It's been a really rewarding experience this year, sort of a silver lining to a tough year.
I just say thank you to Eric for organizing this this year, because it's been an extraordinary, I think, burden to put together all of these online conferences and to manage our very large crowd. But thank you, Eric, for your hard work on this. So,
my pleasure.
For your talk. Thanks.
All right, thanks everyone. We'll see you soon.